All right, y'all. So let's get started. It's 6 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Gabby, aka Bookish AfroLatina, and I'm here with Merrimack Valley Black and Brown Voices co-founder Elizabeth Walther-Grant
Hi,
to
everybody.
discuss this book, Never Caught, the Washingtons. It says the Washingtons' relentless pursuit of their runaway slave, Ona Judge. This is by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. Liz, do you want to give a quick plug for MVBBV on here?
Sure. So MVBBV is a group that was founded in June of 2020, and we help to support the BIPOC community in Merrimack Valley. Gabby is actually one of our board members, which we are so excited about. And we do a plethora of different things. We try to host events. We try to support the BIPOC community in any way that we can. We host fundraisers. We currently have some Black History Month events going on. We have a website where you can learn more because I could go on and on. So it's mvbbvoices.org.
Awesome. All right, so we're doing this President's Day chat because I study history a lot. I study the history of race in the U.S., and I often notice when we talk about the history of our founding fathers, we leave out the other people that made their lives possible in the first place, their accomplishments possible, I should say. So these people are often in the background. We're seeing more and more exhibits talking about them, but I feel like I can do my part here too. I mean, technically I'm doing her part. But yeah, I love Erica Armstrong Dunbar because she is, well, since I study the history of race and enslavement and whatnot, her books, this is her second book, I think. I have one of her other ones as well, and that one's about enslavement too. But she is a scholar of scholars. Like, let me read her background real quick. Because as a librarian, I think it's extremely important that when you are going to be reading a book or a source or something like that, you need to look up the author and find out about them. So I'm just going to show her picture real quick here.
Gabby, I got to jump out just one quick
Sure.
second so I can go get the questions to ask you.
Okay.
Right back.
So y'all, I'm going to read this overview while Liz is getting the questions. So Erica Armstrong Dunbar is the Blue and Gold Distinguished Professor of Black Studies and History at the University of Delaware. She has been the recipient of Ford, Mellon, and Social Science Research Council fellowships and is an Organization of American Historians Distinguished Lecturer. Her first book, A Fragile Freedom, African American Women and Emancipation in the Antebellum City, was published by Yale University Press in 2008. So the other book that it was just talking about is this one here, Enterprising Women. So I'm gonna be reading that later on, not right now, but hey y'all. So I'm just gonna give Liz a little bit more time. I'll just keep giving you some more background stuff. Something that I think that is important when we're talking about this is that I'm not trying to bash anybody. I'm simply talking about what's in this book. However, some people see it as bashing because they feel like it's like against the rules to say anything bad about historical figures. And the thing is, as a historian, I disagree. I think that it's important to show people in their humanity. George Washington was a human being. He had his own flaws, so does everybody else. Sometimes the flaws outweigh the good for people, and sometimes not. And so this is really important, and that's why we're talking about this. So another thing I want to talk about before we get going is the plot of the book. On the spine, I just want to read what's in here first because Dunbar actually wrote a really great overview of this book and why it's important. So let me just see if Liz is ready to hop back in. Nah. Okay, so I'm going to read this real quick. Hey, y'all. So it says, when George and Martha Washington moved from their beloved Mount Vernon in Virginia to Philadelphia, then the seat of the nation's capital, they took 9 enslaved people with them. They would serve as cooks and horsemen, as house servants and personal attendants. The North was different for the entire household, free and enslaved, white and black. There was a new climate to adjust to, and new mores as well. Slavery in Philadelphia, at least, was looked down upon. Indeed, there was even a law requiring slaveholders to free their slaves after 6 months. Yet George Washington thought he could outwit and circumvent the law by sending his slaves south every 6 months, thereby resetting the clock. Among the slaves to figure out this subterfuge was Ona Judge, Martha Washington's chief attendant. Having interacted with Philadelphia's sizable free black community, let me add Liz here. Okay. So having interacted with Philadelphia's sizable free black community, Ona Judge observed and soon longed for liberation, and risking everything she knew, leaving behind everyone she loved and had known her entire life, she fled. Here, then, is the story not only of the powerful lure of freedom, but also George Washington's determination to recapture his property by whatever means necessary. Never Caught is the only book that examines the life of an 18th century fugitive woman in intricate detail and provides a new look at George Washington's relationship to slavery. So I think that this is it says it's an important must read, and I'm gonna co-sign that, because I'm just saying right off the bat, y'all, he never stopped chasing after this woman. And I'm just saying right now, she escaped during his term as president, his first term as president. So there's the tea on that one, just to get started.
That's some tea.
Gotta know it. You gotta know it. So I'll just give some background info on her real quick, and then we'll get into the questions. So Ona Judge also had another last name because she got married later in life. Her last name added is Staines, and she had a nickname that was Oni. So that's Oney. She was born into servitude in 1773. She and her mother were owned by Martha Washington. And on Saturday, May 21st, 1796, at age 22, she ran away from the president's mansion in Philadelphia. So that's before the White House was created in Washington, D.C. And she escaped on a ship that was commanded by Captain John Bowles. He didn't know if she was enslaved or not. He may not have even cared. We don't know. But he did likely see her and was probably just like, oh, here's another light skin. So he was like, moving on. The journey took 5 days on ship, and she ended up in, where was it? In New Hampshire. Yeah, on that ship. She ended up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She ended up marrying a free black man in 1797, so it's like a year later, named Jack Staines, and he was a sailor. And she and her children spent their entire lives as fugitives. So since the children take the condition of the mother, the children were also considered enslaved property of Martha Washington and her family. So that's a messed up part altogether, but that also meant that they'd be fugitives for their entire lives until slavery became illegal. So yeah, they were Martha's property through her first husband, who was the Custis family. All right, so that's the background. Now let's get into the questions.
So, first question we have is, how many people did the Washingtons enslave?
All right, so according to this book, through Martha, they held about 300 people in bondage. So she inherited most of those people from her husband, like I said before. And I think George had a few of his own, and they also had indentured servants who were white. So not everybody knows about that, but that just means they weren't there their whole lives. They could work it off and then leave.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I don't know if you want me to ask this since you already kind of went through Ona's background.
I mean, I could give a little bit more because I didn't really talk about her day-to-day stuff.
Well, I was going to ask,
yeah.
What was her life like? So that's her day-to-day.
Yeah. So what she did day-to-day, she mostly worked on clothing the Washingtons. She was like the go-to for almost everything for Martha Washington, as her mom used to be. Her mom was what they called a clothier or something. So basically she had a knowledge of fabrics, weaving, dyeing fabrics, and other things like that. She was dressing Martha Washington. And so she passed that to her daughter. And so Ona was doing that. And then at some point, when they moved to Philly, she started taking care of their grandchildren. She was like supposed to be distracting them or something, keeping them entertained or whatever, like a
And
clown. Yeah, like a clown,
oof,
basically. So she did all that and anything else they asked of her, and she was supposed to do it as silently as possible. This is something that she says herself in her account,
wow.
because the book actually uses some of her accounts from two newspaper interviews she did after the Washingtons passed. So she spilled her own tea. She was ready to share. She was ready to share. And she did have siblings. When she was enslaved, she had siblings who were older than her from her mom's past relationship. And the one of them lived with her and was enslaved by Washington as well. And when they went to Philly, he was working with her. But after they survived the yellow fever epidemic, he passed away in like an accident, I believe. He ended up in a river. It was crazy,
Hmm.
like real sad story. Then the mom passes away, and at this point, Ona is pretty much by herself with the Washingtons. And when she got to, I forgot to mention this, when she got to Portsmouth after that, she ends up living in an area called Greenland, New Hampshire, which is outside of Portsmouth. If anybody's from there, I don't know.
Actually, like work in that area, so I know it very
Oh,
well.
for real?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really weird. I don't know if they have anything like dedicated to her there, but
I,
she was there for a minute.
there's I know there's like a, just because I used to walk it because the salon I work at used to be in Portsmouth, and I used to park in free parking and then like walk to it, and I used to
Mhm.
walk past the little area in downtown Portsmouth that they have for the enslaved people that were in Portsmouth. So I'm actually
Oh
curious
my
to see if
gosh.
there's something about her in there, because there are these like metal statues of enslaved people up there, and they have names and stuff on them. So I'm
Hmm.
curious to see if Elena's up there.
Well, let me know because then we can do a little trip.
Yeah, definitely
We could
will.
do a little pilgrimage if we're
Yeah.
in place. Yeah, so that'll be cool.
All right. Next question is, you probably answered this, but we can answer it again. Is how long was she enslaved for?
So that's 22 years since she was born in bondage, and she escaped at 22. Some say 23. It's kind of hard to tell because you don't know what month she was really born. There's no,
Mhm.
like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they kept a real record of people that they didn't consider human beings. So uh,
True.
it's kind of hard. And it's not like they were like celebrating her birthday or something.
Yeah.
So,
And who were her parents? I know you kind of talked briefly about them, but if there's more information.
yeah. So I mentioned Betty. That was her mom. She isn't mentioned as having like a last name really. They just call her Betty, or like what was it, Negro Betty or something like that. It was something messed up, like obviously. And so Ona's dad was an Englishman. He's a white guy named Andrew Judge, and he was an indentured servant. So he was working for, yeah, he was a servant for the Washingtons, and he was a tailor. So it made sense that they would like bump into each other because they were working on their clothing. And they would, and she would have been in the house, so it's not like she wouldn't have seen him. However, there's no evidence of what kind of relationship this was. She didn't really go into detail, so we don't know if it was consensual or not.
Mm.
But what's interesting about it is she gave her daughter his last name.
Hmm.
So there's got to be something going on there, but she gave her the last name, and if she hated him, like I don't know. I mean, she could be using it. It could have been using it for like legal purposes or some other kind of thing. There's no way of knowing right now. But that's the fun part about history is you can do the detective work and find out.
Somebody did say that there is a Black Heritage Trail in Portsmouth, and that
Woo!
the little area I was talking about is part of that Black Heritage Trail.
Okay, we're gonna have to hit that up.
There are also good restaurants in Portsmouth, so.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
All right. So was her attempt in the book the first attempt that she made to run?
Surprisingly, yes. So this is weird for this story. I've read a lot of slave narratives, and they often like talk about multiple tries of trying to escape or having been planning it for like months at a time. But at this point, like Ona, she's surrounded by in Philadelphia, she's surrounded by majority free people. These are free black people. There's a very small amount of enslaved black people in Philly. So at this point, like, she's surrounded by these people. People in Philly supported abolition. And there was, as I mentioned beforehand, there was a law in Pennsylvania that if you kept enslaved people in the city or in Pennsylvania for 6 months or longer, then they could be freed.
Oh,
And
wow.
so she probably learned about that from literally anybody walking down the street. I'm sure. So she likely did have help um, from those folks, but she doesn't like give names, because it's not safe.
Because Philly
So
was a
what were you saying?
predominantly Quaker
Yeah,
state at the time, right? And they're very
yeah,
staunch abolitionists.
yeah.
Yeah.
They became staunch abolitionists. They used to also enslave people.
Ew, come
Um,
on, Quakers.
I'm not lying. Yeah, people are shocked by this. This is the truth. Quakers used to be involved in enslavement,
Mm,
and then they started having arguments about it earlier than everybody else, at least,
yep.
about how this clashed with their faith. Some of them didn't want to let go because, that's their money. But the other ones were like, I am morally opposed, blah, 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 and they let it go. But yeah, obviously, overall, they started leaning more towards abolition sooner than anybody else. So they have like a good rap. Like it's kind of
Mm,
like Boston
anymore.
and stuff. Like everybody be like, "Ooh, Boston is like where they, in Massachusetts they let their enslaved people free early on. They were the one of the first states, blah blah blah." But the thing is, Boston also was one of the first states bringing enslaved people in. Just saying, as a
Mhm.
colony, they were enslaving people. So I'm not gonna give you cookies just because you were like, you know what?
Doing
Maybe I'll
terrible things.
stop now. No, sorry, but I don't appreciate is the truth.
So rude.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Did she go alone?
Yeah, she did go alone. She went on a ship. I think I mentioned the captain. Yeah, she went on a ship alone, which is like kind of suspicious at the time because like it's not like ladies were allowed to be walking around by themselves. And I am like being truthful when I say allowed, like literally. I don't think that any woman was supposed to be walking by themselves, but since she was pretty good at being going unnoticed as an enslaved woman, she probably was passing as a free woman. So everybody was probably like, whatever, ain't got time for this. And this in the city too. Like, you know how it is in the city. Everybody walked by, like, okay, I have things to do. Don't care about you. Like, out of my way. The speed walking. So I
So,
expect like everybody just was ignoring her.
what made her run?
So outside of the normal stuff that would make somebody run, the brutality of enslavement, she was supposed to be gifted to Martha Washington's granddaughter.
Mm,
And her granddaughter had just gotten engaged. So what does this mean? This means that Ona would then be exposed to another man who could possibly rape her. So this guy that the granddaughter was engaged to was actually known to be someone who liked to sleep with non-white women.
ooh.
So she was in trouble. It was scary. She didn't really want to like take any bets, and if she did go with them, they'd be heading back south. So she was kind of screwed, and she knew if she ended up back south, she wouldn't be able to escape.
Mhm.
So at this point, like I said, she's 22, and she's like, okay, either I leave now or I'll never have a chance again.
That's fair. That's fair. I'd do the same thing.
Yep. Be like, okay, bye.
Peace.
Yeah.
Um, how were there so many free blacks in Philadelphia?
So yeah, I mentioned the part about the law there in Pennsylvania with like the 6 months and you're free kind of thing. So the other folks, they would have been freed because of that law. Then there's also folks who were born free there. So that's another thing in Pennsylvania. So those people were in the majority. The minority of people would have been in a situation similar to Ona's, where she would like be ferried out. Basically, like the Washingtons were rotating their enslaved people from
Mhm.
their household, and they would send some to Virginia, right at like before the 6-month mark, so that it was like, don't count, you know. I'm like, oops. So they would send one of them at a time, so like nobody would get any ideas and stuff. And they were real careful to bring only the people they thought wouldn't run, which is hilarious to me now. And like hindsight, to be like, I don't think she'll do it. So yeah, that stuff.
All right. And was there anything about the book that surprised you?
Yeah, so one of the things that surprised me, and I think other people, especially on Goodreads, was that there was a lot of this book that was actually focused on the Washingtons. And so just information about the Washingtons that you may care or not about. And you'd be like, okay, like, why is she sharing all this detail about them? Like, who cares? I want to learn about Ona Judge. But the thing is that you cannot tell Ona's story without telling their story. And you can't tell their story entirely without talking about her. And that's what they're trying to show. That's what Erica is trying to show in this, is that their histories are connected. And so one of the things that popped out at me was that she kept mentioning Washington's discomfort with his teeth. And I know that everybody would be like, oh, yeah, you have the stupid wooden teeth, right? Yeah, that's the story that everybody keeps talking about. But if you look up, even on the website for Mount Vernon, if you look up his teeth, you'll find out that his teeth are from Black folks. Like, he didn't have wooden teeth. He had what's it called? A denture. Like, he had dentures made from enslaved people's teeth. Some of it he paid for, and some of it he didn't. Some of it he just had it pulled from his own people's teeth. And homie was walking around with them, just like, you know, I can't fathom the idea of being like, this is fine, you know, and so
Being
she
okay
doesn't
with
go into
having.
deep. Yeah, someone else's teeth in your mouth, and you're
Mhm.
like, yeah, that's okay. It's just weird. I like, she doesn't go into like detail on that. I had to look it
Mhm.
up, but something else is like, I love looking at her sources, because I went to go look. Oh, hey, Bria.
Hi, Mia.
I went to go look up some of her sources because I want to use it for research.
Mhm.
And if you go on like Mount Vernon website or something, they have a section where you can like read some of their letters and stuff. I was reading Martha Washington's letters, and she was terrible. Like,
Was
one
she?
of them, she was mean. Like, she was saying, people think of the Washingtons as being like nice slave owners and stuff, but she was the worst. Like, in her letter, she's writing to her husband. He's like, I miss you. I wish you could come out to like this station with me because I'm lonely and need your counsel, whatever. She's writing back talking about, you know, I'm just sick and tired of this lazy N-word. She's not doing her work, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna have to set her straight. Basically, she literally said, I want to break her, meaning she wants to hurt this girl so badly so that she will know her place. And she's talking about this casually in a letter to her husband, like, I know you miss me and all, but I gotta hurt this girl. Like, can you does that sound nice? No.
It is crazy to me that like we get this perception and we're taught about the Washingtons and we're taught about almost every president in like such a positive light, and that we like a lot of it does get ignored, and like most of the stuff that I've learned about like the Hemings from Jefferson and
Yep.
all of this, like you don't even really learn about until you're out of like grade school and high school and whatnot. Like this is all stuff I learned about in college and because I went to Monticello. But like,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been to Mount Vernon too, and like I was in middle school, but you definitely don't really learn sort of the dark side of the Washingtons at all. Like, and like, where does the wooden teeth thing come from? Like, why is that the thing we learn? Because like,
I think that was purposeful propaganda to sugarcoat the situation, because it's not like they wanted to like up and tell children in school when they're like doing this indoctrination basically
yeah,
to make people more nationalistic. Like, you don't want to be telling the kids like, this grown man decided to wear other people's teeth. Like, do you,
it's true.
you know, like that
There's
wouldn't fly
part about
very
Washington
well. I
at
don't
a young
think the
age too.
6-year-olds would be into it, you know.
No,
So I'm sure they were like,
no.
let me just clean this up a bit, right? But the other part that cracks me up is the whole like, he could never tell a lie thing. So
Mm-hmm.
that part, is also something that I think is funny, because if you read this book, there's a part where she literally talks about all of the illegal things he was trying to get people to do just so he could get her back. Like like he was like, oh well, for you after our death. He had no say in that. He didn't own her. And he's over here like, we'll free you if you come back. You know, he was coming up with all kinds of things. And like one of his buddies who was a lawyer had to be like, listen, that's against the law. Like, you should know this. Like, didn't you guys just finish didn't y'all just finish fighting a revolution and like writing some new laws and stuff?
So
But
crazy.
yeah, that whole, and the other part that really jumped out at me, apparently he was one of the first people to write that fugitive slave act, the one where like basically if somebody ran away, that the master could come and chase after them or send people to chase after them. He's the one who brought that up in the first place.
Which is where police
So
force came out of.
yeah,
Thanks,
so thanks Washington.
wow. I feel like I'm like relearning the Washingtons. Like that's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's too much. And I just think so one of the things you have to keep in mind, like when we're reading these books and we're reading this history and stuff, is how easily any little thing could change the lives of the enslaved people that were living in that household. So you're keeping in mind, like, if the mistress had a bad mood, you better know it's going to be enacted on them. Something's going to happen to them because of her bad mood. You know that if he has toothaches, it's going to have something to do with them. You know, like literally anything. I mean, there's also, you know, that like if somebody passes away in the family, then it's time to get scared, because then that means that either someone has debts or someone has whatever it is, and they got to saddle up the payments and stuff, and that means that people will be sold, people will be rented out sometimes to other people or other businesses to make money, all kinds of stuff. So it's literally any little thing could change what would happen to you.
So crazy.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing some
So
people asking questions in here.
let's see.
Let's see what we got. So, someone mentioned the Royal House. Yeah, plug to the Royal House in Medford, Mass. I still haven't done a tour there, but I have read a lot about them. I'm gonna scroll down. Let me see. Yeah, the Dunter part, pretty gross. Okay, someone says, have you read the book about white women owning slaves? They were her property, I think it is. Yep. So I have that book. I haven't read it yet, but I've read a book similar to that in my research for my thesis in the past, because I was trying to, no, it was for another assignment. Yeah, I was trying to get an idea of like the relationship between like mistresses and the enslaved people. Also to look into the relationships between mistresses and enslaved black men, just because of, you know, the stereotypes and stuff like that. And yeah, I definitely walked out of that realizing that there's this like sexist myth that women, especially white women, are like the kinder of the two, you know? And in actuality, a lot of the time they were even worse than their husbands because they were feeling a lack of control. And so when you're like knowing that your husband is like raping people and you have there's nothing you can say about it, you can't stop him. He's having babies with the enslaved people and stuff, and they're walking up in your face and you can't do anything about it. They would lash out at the enslaved people instead of at the husbands because they had no say. And of course, they saw themselves as the innocent party in that, but they could be really cruel. As like I said with Martha Washington, she actually ordered. I forgot to mention when she said she wanted to break that girl, she was talking about whipping her. Like she literally talks about how much she wants that girl to be whipped just so that she could change her attitude and be like, what's the word that she wanted her to be? She wanted her to be quiet and like docile and stuff. So we know that is dangerous when you think of these women as like dainty and stuff. And you see to this day with our little Karens that they're the descendants of Martha Washington, I would say. We got the Karens following her.
All those portraits are very
Mm,
deceiving. They always look so demure and so
I know.
quiet and polite, and it's like
So sweet.
psychopaths whipping little girls for
Hmm.
having an attitude.
So I see another question. Was George Washington in love with this girl? No, he wasn't in love with her. He saw black people as being inhuman, and he saw mixed people as being like kind of all right. He was like, oh, at least they're mixed with white, so now they're a little bit smarter. That was his viewpoint of her. And he really didn't care about her personally. He just wanted his wife to keep on living the happy life, and she felt like she couldn't do that without her property. And also, part of the reason why he was so obsessed with chasing her down was because if he didn't, then the other people that they owned would be like, hold up, we could have left this whole time. Let's run. Yeah, you know, like they didn't want to give anybody ideas. So that's why they were getting so upset and like following her around and stuff and trying to track her down. And I will say, she did almost get caught. Ooh. Like, they sent somebody up there. So she was walking around in Portsmouth after she got there, and she bumped into somebody who knew the Washingtons and who recognized her. And she's like, just keep your head down, keep walking, you know. And the lady did recognize her, and she's like, how do I know her? And then she happened to be the senator's daughter in New Hampshire. And so she tells her parents, like, I have a feeling I know this chick. And they're like, oh, you know, the Washingtons, their slave ran away. And so they're all talking about it, and they're like, yeah, let's tell him. So they tell Washington, and he starts trying to send people to, like, subvert the law so that they can get her for him. And in doing this, he has this guy with the last name Whipple, which is like a funny name generally. So he sends Whipple up there. The thing is, he doesn't realize that Whipple is like, he feels he empathizes with Ona's cause, like with Ona's struggles and stuff. So he's not about to like force her and drag her down. He actually sits there and tries to convince her to come back, and she's like, yeah, like lying to him to his way, like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll come with you. And then he's like, yes, you know, he goes to the port thinking she's coming too. And when she didn't show up, he was like, well, I tried, you know. Oh well, like he kind of knew it was gonna happen, but like he just had to do what they hired him to do. So they tried. But I just think it's funny that she was like, yeah, I'll come.
I'm down. Meet you there.
She dipped out. She was like, bye.
Like, yeah, I'm coming.
Yeah, I'll be there. You go first. You go first, though. Oh man, yeah. I like finding like the funny little parts in there in the history. And what's kind of cool too is that this book had praise from the other author. So the author of the Hemings of Monticello. So that's Annette Gordon-Reed. Love her. She says, a portrait of a woman whose life reveals the contradictions at the heart of the American founding. There is no way to really know the Washingtons without knowing this story. She was right.
Okay. No, I gotta go.
Yeah, so it's real good. Yeah, y'all have to cop this. And also, like, all of these recommendations are like big time people. We got people who are known for their writing in race history. And then she has the National Book Award right there. She got it.
I like Angelique saying that all these Karens are just descendants of Martha Washington.
It's the true story. You heard it here first, folks. The Karen, one of the first. Yeah, no, she's the worst, if I could say.
Yeah, I am just truly astounded by like the amount of stuff that we learn in school and just how inaccurate it is. And like it's just so funny to me because like everybody's like, oh yeah, like Russia brainwashes their citizens and China brainwashes their citizens and like they don't tell them everything, and it's like, but like we do that here.
We do the same thing. Yeah, we're doing it here.
What do you mean?
Yeah, it's super awkward. And I know people always make the excuse. They'd be like, you know, like young people, they're too young to hear the truth. It's too dark for them, blah, blah, blah. But okay, like, let's be real then. What the experiences that you and I have as young children, experience with racism, we clearly weren't too young to experience that, were we?
No.
Yeah, so I feel like if we're not too young to experience it, then I don't think we were too young to learn the truth.
No, and it's just like, at what point do you actually learn the truth? Because like I went through all 12 years of public schooling, and
Mm-hmm.
never learned the truth. And it took
Yeah.
leaving like the public school system and the school system in general. I even went to private school and didn't learn any of this either. And it
Yep.
took leaving and like kind of having to do my own outside research, whether through a college class or just like my own curiosity, to learn a lot of the things that I've learned about this country and about the real sort of dark truths that we didn't learn
Mm-hmm.
about in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't learn any of this stuff until grad school, even, and so that's
Yeah.
pretty embarrassing in itself. The only reason I know it is because I study history, and because I
Mm-hmm.
went to grad school. So I had that privilege of doing that. But I did my best to sate my like curiosity and learn myself, because I knew no one was going to tell me if I didn't ask, and I didn't know, like, when you can't ask if you don't have the right question.
No.
Like, you don't know what the question is to ask. So I tried to educate myself as much as possible. This one took me a while to get through. Like, I'll be honest, it's not even that long. I mean, those are my little stickies, but like, it's not like that thick of a book, but it took me a while to get through because I kept having those moments where I'm like, wow, really?
Mm-hmm.
Really? You know what I'm saying? Because she goes into so much depth. Like, I'm just going to say some of the parts that really not shocked me, but like impressed me, was that this woman went through the detail to research the weather during these certain things happening. She was reading Washington's journal, and he used to talk about like what the weather was each day, what just happened, stuff like that. So she was going through all this detail to find out what was happening when, like what kinds of thought processes some of these people would have had based on their experiences and stuff. So she went real in depth without turning this into like Anna Karenina or something like that. It's not like a huge tome.
Mm-hmm.
She goes into a lot of detail in a small space, so that's why it took me a while to just digest everything she was saying. And I mean, I really dove into, like, not everybody pays attention to the notes or
Mm-hmm.
anything in the books. I'm going to tell you right now, if you are writing any papers in school or anything like that, I'm going to need you to pay attention to the notes section in these books. You will get all of their sources and find out where they got their information from, the extra little notes that the authors have, because sometimes like you can't fit everything in the main part. And I think that a lot of people forget that these authors didn't just like plop it out of their head like, oh, I remember that one paper that I read and it said this. No, like they are literally they are literally taking sections from their research and trying to figure out how to fit it in there with all of the detail. So
Yeah.
it's very important that we keep that in mind and that we pay attention to who's writing that we're reading from and where they're getting their info from, because that's how we end up in this mess, is that we have only one type of person writing our textbooks and writing our big books that we're following.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody's like, how come we didn't know this? Oh, gee, I wonder why. I
Facts.
wonder why.
I know.
This is important.
I'm gonna share a little secret about myself. So I personally love romance novels, and
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot from Beverly Jenkins, who is a Black romance novelist, and she writes Black historical romance, which I feel like you never find.
Love
And a
it.
lot of the stuff that she talks about, a lot of it is about slavery, but she also brings up other Black topics. But so much in her books that I never knew, and like I'll read through the notes at the end and like read through her sources and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely, there's so much that we don't know that I feel like we
Yeah.
don't get taught, and it's like crazy that I'm learning from a romance novel about like Black history, but like you know.
Not gonna lie. So a lot of I'm just gonna plug like historical romances and historical fiction books right now. Just because they are fiction does not mean they don't have kernels of truth in
Yes.
them. So these authors don't just write this out of their like out of nowhere. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, they do the research so that they understand this. So another romance author I would follow would be Alyssa Cole, because she also has some Black romance novels that are historical fiction, one of which she writes about one of my favorite historical figures. So there's a woman who works, she's formerly enslaved. She works for a white woman who used to own her, named Elizabeth of Anlou. Everybody thought of her as Crazy Beth,
Mm-hmm.
is what they said, because she was acting like a little weird so that no one would pay attention to her.
That's
This is
awesome.
during the Civil War, and everybody knew that she was an abolitionist and stuff, so they naturally already thought she was crazy to begin with. But this is Virginia, and so they're thinking like, oh, she's just some weird old lady. Um, what they didn't know was that she had taken up. Let me find her name. I just it's like on the tip of my tongue. Um, there was a woman that she took in who she had as a spy,
Oh, that's cool.
and this black woman had photographic memory. Oh, her name's Mary Bowser. That's the name. So Mary Bowser had photographic memory. She pretended to be a slave in the Confederate White House.
That's awesome.
She was like, yes, sir, and all that stuff. And in the meantime, like he would let her, the president of the Confederacy would let her clean his office and stuff. And she was over here memorizing his maps and plans.
It just goes to show
They
like
had no
what
idea.
thought about black people that like
Yeah, they were like, oh, she's stupid.
could never be as smart as them or
Yeah,
smart.
she'll never know. I just thought that was too funny. Like
That's
she's over
awesome.
here memorizing their plans and stuff, and then she'd go back home and be like, "Listen, Bet, check this out." Like she redraw the map, tell them all this stuff, and because of her, we wouldn't have won. Like if it weren't for her, we wouldn't have won some of the battles we won.
That's crazy.
So just saying, give her flowers. Like she's the queen and my favorite, and there needs to be a movie on her because she's like James Bond. Just saying.
Boys gotta be thinking black, doing the
Just
dirty
saying,
work.
just saying. I think somebody asked me if I could read a little section,
Yeah.
like one part that I like. So I'm gonna go. Okay, so I'm gonna read this part that here we go. So it says, by his peers, the president was not considered a violent slave owner, but all of the slaves who worked for him in Philadelphia and out at Mount Vernon knew that on occasion he could lose his temper. So that's one. There was
Wow.
another section I wanted to include. Okay, so here was the part that was weird too. It says, imprudently believing that he could prevent his slaves from hearing about the laws, Washington insisted that with the utmost discretion be used regarding their plan of slave rotation in and out of Philadelphia. So he was like, keep it on the low. Don't tell them why you're sending them home. Like, just be like, here's vacation. Go visit your family.
To being
Yeah,
enslaved.
I just can't like. Good luck. You get to go on the plantation for like 3 months, and that's vacation. And the fact that he thought they were dumb enough to not notice what he was doing is also weird. Um, yeah, he did this whole thing while he was in presidency. Where is the other one that I wanted to include? Oh, here, this is wild. So it says, believing that interracial slaves were more attractive and intelligent, Washington preferred to buy yellow-skinned men and women.
Ooh.
So that's another like tidbit in there. Yeah. So y'all better get this book, read this book. I'm going to plug the other books again for those who weren't there this earlier. So there's, usually President's Day is about Washington and Lincoln. So if you want to read about Lincoln's tea, like his dirty bits and whatnot, y'all should read, what is it? 33 Nooses. Let me find it in my Kindle. And it's about his relationship with Native people. He actually was one of the people behind the idea of the Trail of Tears. So surprise, yeah, Lincoln ain't no saint either. Pretty gross. Yeah, 38 Nooses. Let me get the cover for you so you can get a picture. So Lincoln, Little Crow, and the beginning of the frontier's end. Here it is right there. So that's 38 Nooses. The next book, a new one coming out, is about James Madison, and it's called Black Madisons, I believe. I'm going to read that one real quick and in a hurry, too. And then we already mentioned the Hemingses of Monticello, and that one is by Annette Gordon-Reed. So we got a lot.
I see that there are some book suggestions in the comments as well for a couple of Beverly Jenkins books, and then there was a kid's book about Mary
Oh,
Bell,
yes.
which is cool.
And I see them talking about it on Code Switch. Yep, I love Code Switch.
Love it.
They're fascinating. Yeah, and yeah, I love listening to Code Switch. There are a ton of other podcasts. I would say y'all check out the links in my description, because I also have like a link to a podcast where I'm talking about race in America and the census. I have a link to a Black History Month research guide that I made that has like a ton of podcasts in there and books and all kinds of resources and such. Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and I think that there are a few events coming up, so I'll be posting about those. Well, not posting. I'll put them in my feed so y'all can look at these events coming up about Black history. And I want y'all to keep an eye out for thinking about what enslavement meant in the North and in the West. Because these are common places where everybody pretends like everything was all gravy and good and nothing bad happened. But I'm just going to say New York had gradual emancipation, for one. So people were still enslaved for quite a while. Same thing with Connecticut. Yeah, it was a hot mess. Rhode Island had some shady dealings as well. And I also want you to think about Oregon. Oregon as a state was created as a white supremacist haven. So it was in the law not to allow Black folks in there.
It's still pretty aggressive there, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. So just keep in mind, this is not the only thing. Like, this stuff didn't happen just because Washington was a Southerner. It was all of them. Like, even Hamilton. I'm sorry to hurt y'all, but I'm gonna tell you right now, Hamilton's wife, was it Schuyler sisters, right? So their family owned slaves, which meant that when he married his wife, he then became the owner of enslaved people. So there's Hamilton. Like, he tried, I guess.
Not really, but okay.
I don't want to hurt people's feelings and like mess up everybody's heroes and stuff. But the thing is, we shouldn't be making people into like big heroes, especially because we know that people are flawed. I'm flawed. You're flawed. Like, literally everybody's flawed. Like, why do we look at them and be like, nah, they never made any mistakes? Never. Just silly.
Also, if you join our group on Facebook, the Merrimack Valley Black and Brown Voices group, if you are BIPOC, Gabby does post a lot of this information on our page, and then we can also try to get it onto our website as well to get a little bit more out there, and onto our Joint Allies page where it gets shared with everybody. So we'll try to get out as much information on Gabby's book recommendations and whatnot as we can.
Yay! So thank all of you for watching, and thank you, Liz, for joining me and making me feel comfy.
Happy to do so.
I felt the feels.
Good. I would love to do this again. I think I had a great time. So
yeah, awesome. Does anybody have any more questions before we hop off of here? More waving. Hello.
Hi, everybody. I guess bye, everybody.
Yeah, I guess bye. Yeah, I don't see any. Okay, somebody's talking about that one book. Mary Bowser and the Civil War Spy Ring. Spy on History. Get that.
A good kid's book, apparently.
Yes.
Teach your kids.
Yes. Teach your kids. Okay. All right, so y'all have a nice night and dinner and whatnot. And I'll see y'all later. Bye y'all. Everybody.